Weather and Forecasting, Module 11. This is part 5 of our video series. And I just want to begin by saying that when it comes to the category naming system of hurricanes through the Saffron-Simpson scale, is that it can be very deceiving. And that I'd like to remind everybody that just because it says Category 1 doesn't mean that this is a weak storm. And if your shelter, what you're about to protect yourself by being inside of or away from that storm, is not built for that type of wind speed or that type of storm surge or that type of strength, you can perish. And so it doesn't matter the category if the structure that you're going to use as protection can't withstand that category. So I don't care if it's a hurricane category 1 or a hurricane category 5. The destruction level can be equal if it happens to hit a place that's ill prepared. So for example, Sandy, which hit in New York, was absolutely devastating. And that's because even though it's a category 3 going down to a category 2 at times when it hit, that category didn't matter. We were not built in this location for that type of storm. And so it devastated us up here. On the other hand, in places that have a high frequency of hurricanes tend to be built for higher categories. But if they're only built to a category 3 and they get hit with a category 4, it's going to be devastating. So it's really not about the strength of the storm, even though that's important. We got to watch these things because that helps us understand the zone of safety too. If you have to evacuate and get out to a certain distance, what is my zone of safety will depend on the categories too, because that helps me know how much energy is in the system itself, in the hurricane system itself. How much fuel does it have before it's going to run out of energy, right? So that helps me know that fact. But it doesn't matter if it's not strong, if the place that you're about to be in is not strong enough to withstand that storm, you are not safe, regardless of its category system. So I'm going to go into trends of hurricane seasons in greater detail in a very specific set of PowerPoint that I made that's going to talk about changing trends in weather and climatic conditions and what we now know to be true and what we can expect to the future. But one of the things that we've noticed is that in recent years, there are two pieces of data that have increased, which is the frequency of storms, which may not be caused by climate change. So the amount of storms that we're getting in recent years, that might not be due to any type of change in climate. It might just be an update in the research or the way that we're able to find the storms. And that's because we've now have all this satellite data that can bring in images of stuff that's happening in open water that we wouldn't normally find unless we were doing flyovers of that region. And so frequency of storm may not be a cause of any type of climate change. It might just be better ways of being able to see the storm in places, so better surveillance system, right? The other major part of a hurricane that we are seeing is the strength of the storm. And that we do believe is caused by alterations in our climate. There is more heat energy and higher temperatures in surface water, which means that we are able to fuel up the storm, able to give more strength, more energy to the storm itself. And that's because what it needs to grow, which is warm ocean surface temperatures, very strong low pressured easterly waves, are having an easier time forming because these locations have a greater amount of heat energy at the surface, which is heating up the water surface, which is translating to variations in temperatures, which are creating pressure gradient force changes, and so on and so forth. And so strength of storm is increasing. Now I'm going to go through the NOAA presentation for how to be prepared for a storm. And I'm going to kind of wax over these how to, what to, because we went through a lot of this, but this is the actual NOAA presentation on it. And so these are good little tidbits, but I just want to go through really quick evacuation, especially if you live in a place where you could get hit with weather disasters or any type of natural disaster. You really should just have like a family-wide natural disaster plan, because you never know when something like phone service or a way to get connected will be down. And so you should kind of have sort of places you will meet as a family and know to go. Another thing to keep in mind is with any type of tropical storm all the way up to tropical cyclone strength thing is that I can have an after effect of flooding. So I might make it through the storm, but then the water that has been dropped by the storm might overwhelm my ability to move that water through any type of treatment plant, sewage system, anything like that. And so I'll have an increase in possible flooding. You want to be careful, especially in city regions, because all of that huge flooded water can create very nasty cesspools of material, as I have a lot of waste material, both human and chemical, floating in that water. That is not like clean, pristine water. That's pretty dirty stuff. Another one can be tidal surge water that moves up with that increase in wind speed with the downdrafts, which push up the wave conditions and create this storm surge that just bombards places. Sometimes it can't recede, or it goes up over the protective walls that are supposed to keep storm surges out and gets stuck in the places behind. And so it can't actually drain out. And so storm surge is a huge concern, which can also lead to after flooding, because I can't necessarily drain it out in any easy way. So I have to actually pump it out of a location. I already went through watches and warnings and being sure you understand what those terms mean. Another major one is that hurricanes can spawn tornadoes. So think tornado safety. Having radio system and knowing your NOAA station. So knowing that like 5:30 on the AM is a weather reporting system is a good thing to have, and having the radio system that doesn't require electricity, having just one battery-based radio somewhere in that house so that you've got something. Don't rely on your phones. Don't rely on that. Preparing your house for a storm or any type of disaster is such an important thing. And even if you have to evacuate, you're going to want to prepare your home. So just think to yourself, like, get all of the loose debris out of your yard, because any of that stuff, a lawn chair, can be picked up and thrown into your house at high wind speeds, cracking into your home and breaking it open. So moving anything that's loose that can get pulled off, ripped off, torn off, or thrown into your house away from your home or tied down is important. So get into those conditions. Another one is to have your disaster supply kit ready, along with a copy of papers. You don't necessarily need the originals. You can leave those in the fire safe box or whatever you feel, but a copy of that paperwork, because you never know when you're going to need it. And then, as I already mentioned, evacuation plans, meetup plans. You should have sort of like a family place and one in town that you can go as a family to kind of find one another again, and a place outside of town with a relative or friend that's like your check-in. And also to have that relative outside of town be your check-in to say you're okay. And I know now Facebook has also taken on this act, where Facebook now has a page where people can check in and say, I'm okay after a storm, so family doesn't have to scramble looking for you. But you could have no Facebook access. And so knowing a phone number by heart and knowing that you can call that one family member out of town, and that family member can check everybody in the family off the list, right? That's an important piece. And it's something we really need to begin to think more about doing for our own personal safety, looking out for one another, because climate changes are happening and weather conditions are strengthening. Knowing what you're going to do with your pets, having that game plan before the storm ever happens, knowing what you're going to do now, like today, a basic game plan. What am I going to do? Because you can't take your pet to the shelter. So if you're going to go to the shelter, you want to keep your pet in good condition. How are you going to keep them safe? And so on those notes, I know that it seems silly, but these are important things. And these are all things that mean something to us. And like with every disaster in this world, it's better that you're alive can't take stuff with you in the end, and the stuff doesn't matter. It's more important that you're alive and that you're well, and those that you love are alive and well. So prioritize accordingly. Be moderately prepared. I'm not saying don't be the crazy person that goes